Alright, welcome to the Arizona Autobots tutorial on how to build costumes out of foam. This one today we'll be talking about how to build a forearm that I'm remaking for the Bumblebee costume. First, you take a piece of cardboard that pretty much fits your arm as I'm showing here. Then you have to figure out the width of the arm, measured off in inches, centimeters, millimeters, whatever your number. Make sure to measure twice. For forearm, you're pretty much going to need 4 sides. So measure at the top and the bottom, and then make straight lines. Also note that you should make the lines along the corrugation, the lines that are in the cardboard, because you can fold the cardboard rather, very easily, and it makes just for a good scrap piece. Originally, we used to use these to make the pieces and then foam on top of them. But we stopped doing that a while ago, and this seems to be just a little bit more efficient. It shaves on weight and several other things, and since we started using contact cement instead of hot glue, it tends to work out for the best. You can see here I'm using a 36-inch yardstick from Home Depot. I think it cost about $9. It's pretty cheap. The cardboard was free. And that right there is a square. Yes, I know it's a triangle. There is a wooden ruler with a metal edge on it. Sometimes it gets you a sharper line when you try to draw these out. Right now I'm connecting the 2 marks I made. I don't recall quite the measurements here for the 4 sides of the forearm, and then I'm going to cut it. And there's being labeled there so you know which ones are which. Cut that down with a pair of scissors I got at Home Depot, the Quiz scissors. They seem to cut everything. I actually cut particle board with that stuff. So these scissors are ridiculous, and they really don't need any sharpening from what they are. So now I'm going to fold along the corrugation, so it just pops into place like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you end up with the 4 sides of your forearm. Now, if this doesn't fit, it's cardboard. You can always make more for nothing, and you want to make sure that it's the right length and everything. It's pretty much you're going to measure from your wrist to your elbow to get the appropriate space anyway. Then find yourself a nice piece of 1/2-inch EVA floor foam. Make sure it fits your cardboard piece. And here's really where you want to get the lines straight. On the cardboard, it doesn't really matter to a certain degree, but let's say your box is 26 inches by 9 inches. You want to make sure that that's absolutely straight on the foam. So when you cut it with razors or scissors, you have a straighter piece, because you can't add material. Well, you can, but it just ends up looking amateur hour at the end. So right here I'm measuring up the forearm parts. We're going to cut those edges off, the puzzle piece edges, and then we will have a proper forearm, at least flat pack version of one. So we're cutting along the edge here. Notice I'm not using a razor blade for this. The key reason really is just personal preference. I mean, if you want to get a nice straight cut, use razor blades. You got to switch them out every 5 cuts or so. But since most of the parts that we make for these costumes are going to go on the belt sander or disc sander, it doesn't really matter. We need to sand in bevels and other things. So let's see. I'm trying to remember what we did next here. I'm just checking the length here of each forearm section. So I'm going to line these out. I'm cutting off this scrap piece here at the end. I'm not going to use for this. We're going to measure the lines on across the top of this. And then what I'm going to do is, you'll see here probably in a minute, that once the lines are on the finished side, which is the smooth side in this particular case, I'm going to transfer the lines down the side and then across the back. Why do I just not measure it on the rough side, you may ask? I need the lines on both sides, actually. So I need them on the finished side and the other side. This side is the part that all the detail and the paint and everything else is going to go on. The other side will be used for, I don't really want to know what you want to call it, but troughing or 45-degree cuts or something. We're basically going to slice out on the back end about halfway through the foam with a razor blade to be able to make the bends work here. So here I am transferring the lines along the side, and then I'm going to bring it down the back. I could probably measure that out, but I'd rather just not have to second guess my own math. So here we go. I'm drawing lines with a Sharpie, And what we're going to do is we're going to take a razor I prefer utility blades as opposed to the straight razor type. You're going to trace, so you see they come in a pack here sometimes. You can get them at Harbor Freight for a couple hundred for a couple dollars. So you're going to trace on one side of the magic marker line and then on the other side of the magic marker line. Press down about halfway through the foam. You don't want to go all the way through because if you cut through, you got to start all over again. Make sure that if you can't draw a straight line, use a straight edge and go slow. You don't want to cut yourself. These things are very sharp, so don't screw around. And once you get your lines in, what you're going to do is you're going to pick out away from you a piece of, in the trough, and then you're going to peel towards you. You're going to pull up a small part like that. Then you're going to just pull towards you very lightly with, in this particular case, would be my left hand. You're just going to dig at that trench there and just pull out about, half the distance. If it breaks off, it's no big deal. You just pick up a second one and just keep drawing it towards you. And do this 3 more times in this case, and you'll have these handy little folds. Again, pull it away, pull that part out. And my cameraman here apparently is out of focus, so I will have to speak with him later. Yeah, you just keep pulling. And the whole point of these is, so when you bend this into a rectangle, you're going to attempt to get 90-degree angles here. So when you have that and then you heat gun the rest of it, the foam will hold its shape a little better and just look cooler. So as we fold it here, you'll see how they bend easier. And then on this one side, it's very important. You got to cut this edge at a 45. So if you're right-handed, you hold the foam in your left hand, scissors in your right hand, and you have the leading edge of the foam touch the top shear. And you're going to do the other edge as well. And the reason for this is when you contact cement these two edges together, you end up with no seams, essentially. So instead of hot glue, which leaves a seam, you can't sand it. Contact cement, you can sand. Here I'm using a heat gun to seal the foam in one step. I don't know if you can see it here, but it changes it to a slightly glossier texture. You're just going to go over it. So I'm doing 2 steps in one here. I am heating the edges so I can bend it really well on both sides, but I'm also sealing the foam. So when it comes time to paint it, we no longer use Plasti-Dip. So this seems to, if you heat it right, it seals it pretty good. Make sure when you fold your pieces, just fold them all the way over and just kind of have it there. The foam cools off rather quickly. Here's our contact cement. Here's a Well-Don from Home Depot made by DAP. No, we're not receiving money from them, but here's looking at you, DAP. So you're just going to take a small chip brush, like it's a half-inch brush, and you're just going to apply the contact cement on the edges. Make sure you hit the top edge of it too, because that's the part that's going to get seen by everybody. So when you sand it, you can get your seams to go away if you use a fine enough grit sandpaper. Make sure you do both sides. This stuff in Arizona, on the can it says you need about 12 to 25 minutes, I believe, for drying time before you can put it together. Depending on the temperature here in Arizona, we can do a lot of things a lot faster. So it usually takes about 5 minutes for it to set so you can actually put it together. Now, once you start pinching this together here, once it touches itself, it's done. So you got to pay attention. You can rip it off, but then you're going to have to cut foam and try to make some repairs. Just make sure that you're ready to go and the surfaces are prepped right. You see here I pinched a little bit on the way up. Now I'm filling in the gaps on the way down. You have like 2 hours of playtime with this stuff. So if it connects and 25 minutes later you notice you missed a spot, just press on it and you could probably clear it. So as you see there, I pulled it down to finish up the seam. Here's the larger belt sander we use. I think it's 2.5-inch belt. And just getting the edges flat. Make sure that your pressure is consistent. You're going to wobble. Watch which way you're going. Get that side just to get the fur off. Depends on what costume you're building, what the part is for. Depends on what you're going to do to the edge. I've got to seal one of these edges here for a forearm. So, but you're going to get these little hairy things at the end. So I just glued some 220 grit sandpaper to a paint stick. And just go along the edges real quick. It'll pull the fur off. Just give a nice finished edge so you don't have to worry about any debris. It's foam deburring, I guess it would be called. Go do it on both sides. You only need a couple quick swipes. You don't need to actually sand it because then you'll get rid of the edge. We don't need the edges to go away. We just need that fur to disappear that's on the end there. All right, so here's, we're going to make the forearm wrist hole. I guess that's a technical biological term. We're going to trace the inside of this thing onto a piece of foam. Boom, there you go. This is not necessarily too precise because it shifts. When you put it in there, it kind of expands the foam. So there's, you're going to lose about an 1/8 inch or something like that. So I think here what I was doing was I was actually just going to trace that as a box and try to make it as straight as I could. There we go. So we have a box. I'm just going to cut it out. And just like the forearms, when you get to the edges, I'm going to round those off to fit in the hole. As you go through these, sometimes you have to, fit it, reshape it, fit it, reshape it, because, foam moves and a bunch of other things. So we're just going to try to find the right way to get it to sit in there. Make sure it's flat. So there's no 45s on this. It's just going to be flat to flat. Now, when you contact cement these in there, it's going to be weird to stick it in there. This is kind of a more of intermediate way of gluing, because again, once it touches itself, it's done. So you can't really get rid of it. So here I'm trying to find the middle of the piece and decide where I want my forearm to go. Because it doesn't necessarily have to be in the middle. It depends on the character. Some characters have forearms that are wider than just, a square here. So you can find a piece of reference that your hand goes through, like this roll of tape. My hand happens to fit through that roll of tape, and I've done enough of these that I know I can get my hand through there with a pair of armored gloves. So some people might use a razor for this. I'm a little bit more comfortable using scissors. I will sand out that middle hole anyway, and it's a rough edge that nobody's going to see, so even if you miss a couple spots, it'll be all right. You can fold it in half. I think I'd do this here in a second to put it on the belt sander to get it a little even. Yeah, here we go. So we're going to use the curved side. So I'm going to fold this thing in half. We're going to use the curve of the belt, which actually is a perfect angle to do this. And once again, with the camera guy out of focus, Jordan, we're going to have to come find you. And, pretty much gets it, smooth enough for our purposes, because you're going to tear it apart anyway, the, constant removing and putting back on of the piece. Gloves are with a Velcro wristband or something like that's going to tear it apart. So again, here's our little sandy stick thing. We're going to go along, take all the little fuzzies off, so there's no debris for the glue to get messed up in. Do both sides just to make it clean enough. Here's our handy DAP well-done contact cement using scissors instead of a screwdriver to open a can like a boss. All right, here's some glue. We're going to put the contact glue on the edges. Once again, make sure you hit the top and the bottom. This seam receives a lot of wear and tear. So you're putting it on, taking it off, putting it on, taking it off. So you want to make sure you get all the edges, get the top, get the bottoms of the edge you're putting the glue on, and make sure you have enough glue. Now, the thing with contact cement is it's ready to stick. Well, this version is when it's not glossy anymore and you can't see the glue, you're ready to go. So if you're in Seattle or somewhere and it takes you, half hour to an hour for this stuff to cure and ready to sit, just make sure when it's not glossy anymore, you're good to go. But even at that point, you still have 2 hours. So sometimes I'll glue up an entire torso, wait till I get all the parts glued, and then come back and shove them all together. So here you've got to put contact cement for the other side of that piece. Remember, sometimes people mark off what side you're gluing on. So this was the side I needed. I had a mark. I'm just going about a 1/2 inch in on all 4 sides, not getting the top, just the inside rough face. Now, putting contact cement on that rough face is a little difficult sometimes because it has nooks and crannies and everything else. As long as you're not using that diamond plate backed stuff, you should be all right. Make sure you hit that leading edge pretty well because that's the contact point there. Now we're going to lay in some designs. So I found this cool figure somebody repainted online, and he did some pretty cool paint schemes on the forearm. So I'm copying this. I believe it's the oversized Bumblebee Masterpiece toy. It's not made by Masterpiece. I forget who makes it. It's an unauthorized figure. So I'm pretty much copying the toy proportions on there. A lot of people ask us, how do you do this? So pretty much you just copy it's kind of a mix of the toys and the original cartoon. That's why it's G1 stuff. So, if you got to zoom in or whatever, get a real good picture. And here we go with all our designs. So now we're going to use a razor. I'm going to first cut out a couple areas to give it some depth. So as we've been doing this, we've learned a couple different things about how stuff works. So we're going to cut this square out, and I believe there's another, or this rectangle out, and there's another rectangle on the other side. And now we're going to back that with a slightly larger piece of foam than that is. And that's going to have a design on it. So it's going to have a, a three-dimensional, well, it's three-dimensional. We're in real life here. So it's going to have some depth to the shape. So it's just not floam. What the heck is floam? Sounds like something you could eat. It's not just foam with lines painted on it. So we're going to back these off and, maybe little computer screens or something. I'll figure it out after we start painting the forearm. And once I, get the other one built. Again, this is a rebuild of the current Bumblebee that the Arizona Autobots already has. He just feels... he's too fat. I mean, he is a bug, a Volkswagen Beetle, but he feels a little clunky. He doesn't run around. It's very hard to move, and he was like the third one I built, I think. So the maneuverability is trash compared to a lot of the newer ones. Rockwave, for example, the newest Seeker, you can do squats in that thing. It's ridiculous. So again, when you're pushing with the razor blade here, though, make sure you're not pushing in halfway. You're only pushing about a quarter of the way in. Every about 10 cuts or so, you're going to need a new blade, flip it around. This circle right here, people ask us about this. I don't know what it is. It's like a mix of Smash Brothers and something else. But if you look closely on every one of the Autobot costumes that we've done, this shape is on every piece somewhere. It could be huge. It could be really small. I'm 99% sure it's on every part of everybody's costume somewhere. It's just kind of like a rancher's brand or blacksmith's brand or something like that. So it's an official costume. I don't know what these parts are going to be. We're just carving them, prepping them for the hot knife, and some backing here. So here is, I'm figuring out what piece is going to fit behind this and cut the edges off because these puzzle pieces are useless, but it's a fun game. I'll show you guys later. Maybe we'll make a game about how to shoot the puzzle pieces off. I don't know. All right, so that's I'm numbering these on the part and on the part on the forearm, so I know which ones go where. I'm just making up a design to go on there. We're going to cut that with a razor blade to match. Now, all of these razor markings, when they're done, we're going to hit them with the heat gun again, and it's going to expand the foam where we've cut in, so it leaves a nice straight line for our wood burner kit to carve in line details and rivets and that kind of thing. So now I'm tracing this piece here, so I'm going to end up with a black rectangle, and in that black rectangle where I'm drawing squiggly lines, we're going to put some contact cement. We don't need to mark the inside because it's obvious where the glue goes. Same with this trapezoidal piece here. We're going to find a piece that fits and trace it out, and then everywhere outside the black lines, hit the camera there, see this is part of that foam game, where you put some contact cement. So you find a piece that fits, we're going to trace it here, and then everywhere, you usually only need about a ½ inch or so, for measure, good measure. We're going to make this straight, and then all these parts here, I'm going to label the part 2 and 2, and inside the squiggly lines, we're going to put the contact cement. And we got one more piece to go, so we're going to trace out the shape here, and pull it out, and pretty much just give us like a ½ inch to a ¼ inch. Label this number 3, and 3 on that side. And I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I'm drawing straight lines and crooked lines and diagonal lines. Just making up shapes. So when you come to making up, panel shapes and that kind of thing, just use your imagination. If you don't have an imagination, borrow somebody else. And they will teach you. So here's our parts. We're going to get our contact cement here in a second. I believe we have to cut that one down. 1, 2, 3 parts. And we're carving our details in that one. All these different lines. And, just because I cut depth here doesn't mean you have to. Later on, we'll probably show you how to add depth on the top side. So, and I know it'll happen on these forearms and definitely on the new torso. So we're going to grab this contact cement, open it with a pair of scissors once again because the screwdrivers are on the other side of the shop and I don't want to walk that far. So once again, glue on this side, glue on this side, I should mention though that this brush I'm using here is just, you get a bag of like 30 of them for $1 somewhere. It doesn't have to be a fancy brush. The good thing about it is once it dries, like overnight or all week, if you put it in the contact cement, within about 20 minutes or so, your brush is pliable again and you can reuse it. So I tend not to throw these out unless I'm trying to get real nice precise lines, then I'll start with a new one. So now this guy's probably ready to go in there. So you're going to start on one side and you can't go straight in because it won't. It'll just stop because it's glue. So you're going to have to figure out which the angle was, and for some reason I didn't mark which side. Usually I'll draw 2 lines across or something so I know where it goes. So I'm going to start in a corner. We're going to work our way around, trying not to let the other edges touch themselves. Sometimes it's a little difficult, but if you can catch them in there, or if it only touches the very top, you're okay. But if the main seam actually hits, you're not necessarily in trouble, because you can kind of recover from that, but you have to keep an eye on all 4 sides here while you're doing this. And you just squeeze it in there until it fits. You compress the foam as you need it, expand it as you need it, stretch it out or compress it together, which is what I'm doing here. Somehow foam finds a way. It works itself out. It settles down just right. So now you're going to go through and press on the inside and the outside, getting all the edges. Try to get them so the gaps are gone. Notice we didn't put any glue in those edges all the way down the forearms. You don't need it. And the reason for the wrists hole here is it helps you keep the part in one spot. Here's our heat gun. We're going to go across, and if you look closely, the lines will start expanding where we cut them with the razor blade. So once again, we're sealing the foam a second time. We used to, after all of this, paint the whole thing with Plastidip, then paint it with a couple of coats of chrome or copper or some real nice metal spray paint to seal it. And we've kind of discovered that you don't need to if you seal it enough times. Some people, one of our people who does prowl, seals her foam with an iron before she even draws on the thing. So she'll just iron out the foam. I haven't tried that yet because I'm not really sure I want to mess around with an iron and do something weird and have it not work, and I need to iron a shirt and it's going to break it. Anyway, so here we're putting our contact cements. See, literally that's the exact time it was to let that glue dry for the temperature of where I was at this time. If you let it sit in the sun, you can do this in like 10 seconds. There is contact cement that's instant. As soon as you put it on, and then you put it on part B, you can glue them right together. I believe that stuff's called barge cement at Tandy leather stores. So we're looking at the contacts. We got one more to go. Contact this one in there. And once it's in there, pretty much it's in there. You just press around the edges, make sure it's in there. Go check all the inside parts. Press down hard if it makes you feel better. Apparently it did right there. And that's all the parts that go in there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to heat seal it again, because now we have these new parts in there. So we're going to get those lines to show up with the heat gun. They're splitting. We're going to go around to the other 3 parts. So this one here had nothing. We're going to seal it real quick and then go to this one. And then we're going to bring it over here. We have 2 different wood burner kits. We have a big one and a small one. This one has the tiny, tiny tip in it. It's meant for, burning into wood and stuff. Pretty much, you're just tracing the lines that you made with the razor blade. They're nice and open because of the heat. You're just tracing them to get them real noticeable. And then every corner, as you can see in those right here in this shot, every one of those corners has a rivet. So wherever there's 2 lines that meet, where it's a panel line, add the rivets. You don't need to do the rivets, but it just adds a little bit more, as people get close to it, they add just more detail to it. So here we're putting a 45 edge. We're doing some fine sanding here, so here you can see, just different designs that are on there. It's not quite fit yet, still spins around. We have to decide where it's going to sit, where's the top, where's the bottom. I don't know why I'm spinning it so damn fast, but I know it's this forearm. Next time we're going to show you how to paint it and to set it up. Oh, maybe it's this forearm. So thanks for watching this video. If you guys have any comments, suggestions, or something that we didn't cover, comment below. And that's it. We'll catch you guys next time. It's not quite fit yet. Still spins around. We have to decide where it's going to sit. Where's the top? Where's the bottom? But I know it's this forearm. And then next time we're going to do... Oh, maybe it's this forearm. Next time we're going to show you how to paint it and to set it up.